After my daughter's marriage into a rich family and losing everything, my job, house, and wife, she said I'd never make it again and I could come and work in her house as the security man. I refused and left. 3 months later, I won a $3 million lottery. Immediately, my daughter heard of this. She started calling me as if everything was normal. What happened next was rather unexpected. Would you take a wild guess before you continue the story? What do you think I'd do to her? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel to support us. It will be great to know in the comments section where you are listening from. Now let me tell you everything that happened. I used to think that love, especially the kind between a father and his daughter, was unshakable, like the roots of an old tree that no storm could rip out. I built my entire life around that belief, poured every ounce of strength and sacrifice into raising Kira after her mother walked out when she was 5. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs. I laid bricks in the heat, scrubbed toilets in the cold, and stood security overnight at gas stations so she could have the kind of life I never even dreamed of. And for a while, it seemed worth it. She was bright, charming, full of fire. She had a way of walking into a room and making everyone feel like they belonged there. But money changes people. Or maybe it doesn't change them. It just peels the curtain back. The day she married into that wealthy family, I stood in the back row of the wedding, wearing a suit I borrowed from my brother, watching my little girl promise forever to a man I'd barely met. Her smile was wide, but not for me. That was the first day I felt like a guest in her life. Things started unraveling for me just after the wedding. The construction company I worked for downsized, and I was one of the first to go. Then came the eviction notice when I couldn't keep up with rent. My wife, my second wife, had already grown tired of my optimism, and when the paycheck stopped, so did her patience. She left with barely a goodbye, just a note on the kitchen table and her ring in the sink. Within 6 months, I went from homeowner and husband to sleeping on the floor of my cousin's storage room, washing dishes at a diner just to eat. I didn't tell Kira any of it at first. Pride, maybe, or shame, probably both. But when I finally called her, when I really needed her, I'll never forget what she said. "Daddy, I can't give you money, but I can talk to Jamal's family. They need someone to keep an eye on the front gate. It's an easy job, and at least you'll be around decent people." She said it like she was offering me a lifeline, but I heard the subtext loud and clear. I wasn't family anymore. I was a burden. I wanted to scream, to shake her and ask where my daughter had gone. But all I managed was, "You want me to work security at your house?" And she laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Well, it's better than doing nothing, isn't it?" That moment, something in me curled up and died. I had been her everything once. Now I was someone she pitied, someone she didn't want to be seen with unless I had a name badge and a uniform. I told her no. No, I would not take scraps from her table. No, I would not stand outside while she hosted dinner parties. And no, I would not be the man who gave her the world, only to end up at her gate like a stray dog. I hung up, packed what little I had left, and left the city with nothing but my pride and a duffel bag. I went to live with an old friend in a small town where no one knew my name, and I told myself I was done with her, done with everything. It was quiet in that town, almost too quiet. But there was a strange peace in being invisible, in waking up to chickens instead of traffic, in sharing instant coffee on a porch that overlooked nothing but trees. My friend Tony had a guest room, a beat-up truck, and no expectations. "You don't owe anyone a damn thing," he told me one night as we watched the sun disappear behind the hills. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something inside me still ached, like an open wound that refused to scab over. Kira's words kept playing in my mind, looping like a cursed song. I could have begged. I could have swallowed my pride. But I didn't. And that choice, standing up for myself, should have felt empowering. Instead, it felt like mourning, like burying the last thread that connected me to my only child. 3 months passed like molasses, slow, thick, and uneventful. I got used to the stillness, even learned to like it. I started doing small jobs around the town, fixing fences, painting porches, even helped Tony remodel his bathroom. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept my hands busy and my mind quiet. Then one morning, I walked into the local gas station and bought a scratch ticket with the last crumpled $5 bill in my wallet. I didn't even look at it right away. Slipped it into my pocket and forgot about it until the next day. When I finally scratched it, I thought it was a mistake. $3 million. $3 million. I stared at it for a long time, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. I checked the numbers 10 times. Then again, I walked back to the gas station, hands shaking, and asked the clerk to verify it. His eyes widened, and he looked at me like I was a ghost. "Sir," he whispered, "you just won the jackpot." Everything after that felt like a blur. The phone calls, the forms, the meetings. I kept it quiet, didn't tell anyone except Tony. He cried when I told him, said he was happy for me, said I deserved it. And for the first time in a long time, I actually believed him. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I had options. I could rebuild. I could live. But even in that moment of joy, a part of me wondered, when she finds out, what will she do? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The thing about sudden wealth, real, life-altering wealth, is that it doesn't just change your bank account. It messes with your mind, rewires your sense of what's real and what's possible. One moment, I was patching a hole in Tony's shed roof with borrowed tools and frayed gloves, and the next, I was sitting in a lawyer's office with polished floors and water bottles that probably cost more than my last pair of shoes. I kept expecting someone to tell me there'd been a mistake, that the universe hadn't really handed me a second chance. But every time I looked at the documents, the verified numbers, the quiet nods from financial advisors, it hit me a little deeper. I was no longer the man scraping by. I had been handed a new life. Not earned, not begged for, just given. And as grateful as I was, there was this deep-rooted bitterness buried beneath that gratitude, a memory of who wasn't there when I had nothing. Tony and I sat out on the porch that evening, the sun melting over the horizon like orange butter across toast. He had a beer in his hand and a grin stretched wide across his weathered face. "You gonna build yourself a mansion now?" he joked, elbowing me lightly. I laughed, but it was hollow. "I don't think I need much more than what I've got," I said honestly. And it was true. The money hadn't filled the empty space inside me. It hadn't dulled the sting of Kira's words. If anything, it made me feel lonelier. Like now that I had something valuable, the world would come knocking, not to celebrate, but to take. I didn't want attention. I didn't want headlines or cameras. I wanted peace. A small house, a garden, maybe a dog, and no one asking me what I could give them. I opened a bank account under a private trust, hired a lawyer to handle inquiries, bought a modest plot of land just outside town, and started sketching out plans for a little two-bedroom house. Nothing extravagant, just comfortable. Something with a porch like Tony's where I could sip coffee and not think about everything I'd lost. But even as I tried to build something new, a storm cloud hung over me. Kira. I hadn't heard from her since the day I turned down her job offer. No texts, no calls, not even a passive-aggressive message on Facebook. For 3 months, she'd gone completely silent. But I knew that when she found out about the money, she'd resurface. And I hated myself for dreading it and longing for it in the same breath. Sure enough, 2 days after the lottery commission officially announced the winner, my phone lit up with her name. At first, I didn't answer, just stared at the screen, watching it buzz across the counter like some venomous thing. Tony glanced over and raised an eyebrow. "That her?" he asked. I nodded, my stomach twisting. "You gonna pick up?" I hesitated. Eventually. But I didn't. Not the first day. Not the second. I let her calls pile up, one after the other, a digital trail of curiosity or desperation. I couldn't tell which. It wasn't until the third morning, as I poured my coffee and looked out at the mist curling through the trees, that I finally picked up. "Hey, Daddy." Her voice was syrupy sweet, like the old days. Like nothing had ever happened. "I've been trying to reach you. I heard the news. Can you believe it? I knew you'd turn things around." I didn't say much. Just listened. Let her talk. She filled the silence like she was afraid of what I might say if I opened my mouth. She talked about how proud she was, how happy she felt for me. She even asked how Tony was doing. "I miss you," she said at one point, and I almost believed it. But there was something rehearsed about her tone. Something too smooth, too practiced. Like she was reading from a script she'd written the moment she heard the word millionaire. Still, I stayed silent, my grip tightening around the coffee mug. "I was thinking," she said after a long pause. Maybe we could come visit. Jamal's been talking about investing in a new restaurant, and I've got this boutique idea I've been dying to launch. We could talk business, as a family. And there it was. The ask, dressed up as bonding, camouflaged as connection. My jaw clenched. I didn't respond, just took a deep breath and said, I'll think about it. Then I hung up. No goodbyes. No promises. Just the kind of quiet that says everything. She called again that night. And the next morning, her messages got longer, more emotional. I'm your only daughter, she said in one. You don't need all that money. You're not getting any younger. Let me help you put it to good use. She even cried in one voicemail, sobbing about how she just wanted to feel close to me again. But on the third day, her tone changed. The mask slipped. You're being selfish, she snapped in a voicemail I played on speaker while Tony and I were fixing the fence out back. You owe me. You think you just got lucky, and now you can forget about the people who were there for you? I'm your blood, Daddy. You show love by giving, not hoarding. I froze. Tony looked at me, eyes narrowed. Well, he muttered, there's the truth. That voicemail snapped whatever lingering doubt I had. She didn't come back into my life because she missed me. She didn't call because she regretted how she treated me. She came because she smelled money. And I realized then that it wasn't the money that changed everything. It just revealed what was already broken. I didn't call her back. I didn't explain myself. I didn't even let anger take the wheel. I walked back into the house, opened my messages, and typed the last thing I'd ever say to her. You were never there when I had nothing. Now that I have something, you are dead to me. Then I blocked her number, blocked her email, blocked every account she had. And for the first time in years, I felt light. It hurt like hell. Don't get me wrong. This wasn't the kind of choice you celebrate. It was the kind that guts you, slowly and thoroughly, until all that's left is resolve. But it was necessary. Kira had made her choices when I was down, when I needed even just an ounce of grace. And now, I was making mine. This money, it didn't buy my dignity, but it gave me the means to protect it. And that was worth more than every dollar in that jackpot combined. The silence after I blocked Kira was strangely loud. There was no ding from my phone, no soft vibration at the edge of the table, no voice trying to mold guilt into obligation. Just air, stillness, a kind of quiet that felt like both victory and mourning. I remember sitting on Tony's porch that night, a blanket around my shoulders despite the warm weather, feeling both proud and hollow. You all right? Tony asked, handing me a fresh cup of tea. I nodded, but it wasn't the kind of nod that meant yes. It was the kind that meant I don't want to talk about it right now. Because deep down, the truth I wasn't ready to say out loud was this. I'd waited years for that call from my daughter. I just hadn't imagined it would come wrapped in manipulation and greed. I thought if she ever reached out, it would be because she missed me, because she realized how far she'd drifted. But all it took was a $sign with 6 zeros to make her remember my number. The next few days were oddly peaceful. No interruptions. No second guessing. I focused on moving forward, kept busy with the blueprint of my new house, and deciding whether I wanted to build from scratch or renovate an old property nearby. But on the 5th day after I blocked her, my phone rang again. Not from Kira, but from a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a contractor or the bank. But the voice on the other end was unmistakable. Daddy, please don't hang up. I had to use my friend's phone. I froze. There was a tightness in my chest I couldn't explain. Half anger, half heartbreak. What do you want, Kira? I asked, already regretting the decision to answer. Her voice cracked. I just want to talk. One last time. No money talk, I swear. But liars always lead with reassurances. She talked for nearly 10 minutes straight. Apologies, excuses, twisted memories where I was somehow the one who abandoned her. She said things like, I was just trying to help you find purpose, and I didn't think you'd take it so hard when I offered you that job. Then, as if rehearsed, she slid right back into it. You know, Jamal and I are really struggling right now. The market is tough. You helping us wouldn't be throwing money away. It would be an investment in your own family. That word, family, hit me like a slap. Family doesn't humiliate you when you're down. Family doesn't offer scraps from the table and call it love. Family doesn't only remember your name when it's attached to a checkbook. I interrupted her mid-sentence. You're not calling for family. You're calling for funding. She gasped like I'd just cursed her out, then went full throttle. You're being cruel. You're old and bitter, and you don't even know what to do with that kind of money. Do you want to die alone with a bank balance you never spent? That was her pitch. That was the daughter I once held in my arms and rocked to sleep, reduced to a voice on a stranger's phone, throwing barbs because I refused to be used. I hung up. Again. And this time, I didn't just block her, I blocked the friend's number too. But I should have known that wouldn't be the end of it. The next morning, I got an email from a shared family friend, someone I hadn't talked to in years. The subject line read, "Hey, is everything okay with Kira?" Inside was a screenshot of a social media post Kira had put up late the night before. It was a picture of her as a child, maybe 6 years old, sitting on my shoulders, grinning from ear to ear. The caption read, "Funny how some parents stop being your heroes when money enters the picture." Guess love really does have a price. It had hundreds of likes, a comment section full of sympathy and moral outrage. People who didn't know the story, didn't know me, flooding the post with things like, "You deserve better," and "He'll regret this one day." One even said, "Just another bitter old man holding on to money he won't live long enough to spend." I should have ignored it. I should have closed the laptop and moved on. But I didn't. I read every comment, every accusation, every twisted version of me that she fed to the public. And the pain, God, the pain, was unlike anything I'd felt even when I was broke. Because now I wasn't just the father she abandoned. I was the villain in a story she was writing for strangers. I called Tony over that evening and showed him the post. He read it, then set the laptop down gently and turned to me. "You know what this is, right?" he said. "She's trying to shame you into giving her what she wants. Public sympathy is a weapon now." I nodded, my throat tight. "But I don't want people thinking I'm some heartless monster." Tony leaned back, took a long sip of his beer, and looked me square in the eye. "Then stop worrying about people who never bothered to ask your side. You know who you are. That's enough." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the next morning, I walked into the local diner and got a couple of side eyes from a group of women by the window. One of them whispered something to another, and they all glanced in my direction. I wasn't imagining it. Word had traveled. Maybe someone in town saw the post. Maybe a cousin shared it. I didn't know. All I knew was that even in this quiet little town where I'd found peace, the echo of my daughter's manipulation had followed me. After breakfast, I stood outside the diner for a long time, watching the cars pass, trying to decide if I should do something, post my side of the story, talk to her again, try to patch things up. But every time I thought about calling her, I remembered her voice asking for half my winnings like it was owed to her. I remembered the laughter in her voice when she offered me that security job. I remembered the way she vanished when I was at my lowest. And just like that, I knew what I had to do. I walked back to the house, sat down with my laptop, and started writing. Not to respond, not to retaliate, but to document everything. The messages, the calls, the voicemails, the timeline. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the narrative without keeping a copy of the truth. Tony came in as I was typing and asked what I was doing. "I'm building my own record," I said, "just in case." He nodded, understanding more than I said aloud. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about legacy, about dignity, about not letting myself be twisted into a caricature by someone who stopped seeing me as a person the moment I couldn't provide. By the end of the week, I had a file saved on my desktop called "Just in Case." I didn't share it with anyone. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But having it there felt like armor. Like a boundary that said, "You can tell your version, but I have mine, and mine doesn't need your approval to exist." And for the first time in a long time, I felt okay with that. When you say someone is dead to you, most people assume it's just a dramatic phrase, some emotional bluff you'll walk back eventually when tempers cool and memories soften. But I didn't say it for effect. I said it because I meant it. Saying those words felt like slicing the last fraying rope tethering me to Kira. It was brutal. It was final. But it was also necessary. See, grief doesn't only come when someone passes. Sometimes you grieve the living. Sometimes, the people you love most leave you no choice but to let them go, not because you stopped loving them, but because they stopped deserving your place in their life. And that's what Kira had become to me, a living ghost of the daughter I once raised, haunting me with twisted expectations and selfish justifications. I loved her still, in a way only a father can, but I couldn't carry the weight of who she'd become. Not anymore. After the online post went semi-viral and the gossip started bubbling, I kept my head down. I didn't respond, didn't post anything, didn't call or text. Silence was my protest, my power. But Kira, unsurprisingly, wasn't done. When she couldn't reach me directly, she started reaching out through others. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly popped up in my inbox. One messaged me on Facebook, opening with, "Hey, Uncle, just checking in. Kira said you've been going through some things." Another called Tony's landline and left a voicemail asking if I was mentally okay, as if refusing to give away my money meant I'd lost my mind. One even suggested I might be under the influence of a toxic friend, meaning Tony, the man who gave me a bed when no one else would. The worst part was my ex-wife. Now she and I hadn't spoken in nearly a decade, unless it was something about Kira. She had remarried and lived 2 cities over, busy with her new life and new name. But suddenly, out of the blue, she called me like it was 1999. "I heard what's going on," she said, skipping pleasantries altogether. Her voice was sharp, like it always got when she was about to issue one of her lectures. "You're embarrassing, Kira. You're acting like a spiteful old man. Do you have any idea what people are saying about you?" I let her rant for nearly 5 minutes. Listened to her lay out all the reasons I was wrong, heartless, vindictive. Then, calmly, I said, "Where were you when I lost everything? Where was this concern when I was sleeping on a floor, working 2 jobs just to eat once a day?" She went quiet. I continued. "I raised Kira by myself for the first 15 years of her life. I put dreams in her head and food in her stomach. And the first time I needed her, she offered me a job at her gate like I was a stranger. And now that I have money, suddenly I'm family again." The line was quiet, thick with the weight of truth. Then she said the one thing that burned more than anything else. "You're just bitter because she made it without you." I hung up. I didn't yell, didn't scream, just quietly ended the call and blocked her number for good. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was still. Tony was already snoring down the hall, and the only sound was the hum of the ceiling fan. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the birthdays, school events, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. I thought about the time Kira cried when I missed her 5th grade recital because I was working overtime to pay for her braces. The time she wrote me a Father's Day card that said, "You're better than a superhero, Daddy. You're real." I remembered holding her after her first breakup, telling her she deserved better, wiping her tears with the sleeve of my work shirt because I didn't have a tissue. I raised that girl with every ounce of love in my bones. And now, she saw me as a vault, a means to an end. That realization, more than any voicemail or gossip, was what truly broke me. A few days later, Tony's niece, AITA, came to visit. She was in law school, smart as hell, with a sharp tongue and a good heart. She'd always been curious about my situation, but never nosy. Over lunch, she asked, "You ever think about writing her a letter?" I looked up from my sandwich, startled. "A letter?" She nodded. "Not for her. For you. Something that says your side. Something that lets you release it." I shook my head. "What's the point? She won't care." AITA leaned forward. "It's not about her. It's about you. You've said you're done, but you're still carrying it. That's not peace. That's weight." Her words landed harder than I expected. That night, I pulled out an old notebook and started writing. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't polished. Just raw, messy truth. I wrote about the pain, the betrayal, the years of sacrifice. I wrote about the moment she offered me that job and how small I felt. I wrote about the silence when I needed her most. And I ended with, "You were my world. But I won't be a footnote in yours. Goodbye." I didn't send it. I folded it, placed it in an envelope, and put it in a drawer. Maybe one day I'll burn it. Maybe one day I'll forget it's even there. But writing it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for too long. By the end of that week, I felt different. Lighter. Not healed, not whole, but no longer hollow. I started focusing on my new home. Picked out tiles for the kitchen, decided on the type of wood I wanted for the floors. I visited a shelter in town and made a quiet donation under a fake name. Not because I wanted credit, but because I remembered what it felt like to need help and not know where to go. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I just didn't want the money to turn me into someone I couldn't recognize in the mirror. A month later, I got another email. This one from Kira. I hadn't blocked her there yet. The subject line read, "Please read." Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was short. No apologies. No acknowledgement. Just, "I don't understand how you could do this to me. I needed you. You're cruel and selfish. But I guess now I know who you really are." I stared at the screen, unmoved. I didn't respond. I archived it, then blocked her email too. Because the truth is, I do know who I really am. I'm a man who gave everything and asked for nothing. And when I needed a hand, I got a door slammed in my face. Now, I'm building something new. Not out of bitterness, but out of the clarity that comes when you finally stop begging people to see your worth. Kira is dead to me. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I finally started loving myself. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes after you've been publicly painted as the villain. At first, it bruises you, deep, hard, personal. You flinch at the whispers, the passive-aggressive stares, the pointed questions wrapped in polite concern. But then something shifts. You realize the worst has already been said, the false narrative has already spread, and you're still standing. That realization, bitter as it is, becomes a kind of armor. I'd been cast as the selfish father who abandoned his daughter over money, and no matter what I said, the crowd Kira had summoned online was too loud to hear the truth. So I stopped trying. I stopped reading the comments. Stopped checking my messages. I poured all that energy into my land, into the blueprint of my new house, into the rhythm of my own healing. Because once someone tries to erase your story, you either fight to reclaim it, or you build a new one they can't touch. I didn't go to church much anymore, but one Sunday, Tony dragged me to a local community potluck being held on the church lawn. It wasn't about faith for him. It was about food, faces, and a break from routine. I agreed, mostly because he wouldn't stop pestering me. The afternoon sun was sharp, and the lawn buzzed with chatter, folding chairs, and paper plates sagging with fried chicken and potato salad. I hadn't even made it 10 steps in when a woman I barely knew, her name was Sylvia, I think, walked up to me, a cautious smile on her face. "I saw something about your daughter online," she said gently, tilting her head. "It's none of my business, but I hope you two are okay." I nodded politely, thanked her for her concern, and moved on. But as I walked through that lawn, I felt eyes on me. Some kind, some judgmental, most unreadable. I wasn't used to being noticed in this town. Tony's place had become a kind of hiding spot, but now I could feel the whispers growing legs. Tony found me under the shade of a tree, chewing a chicken wing. "They're talking," he said, not bothering to sugarcoat it. "Not sure what version of the story they've heard, but your name's making the rounds." I stared out at the children running through the grass, their laughter a stark contrast to the heaviness pressing down on my chest. "Let him talk," I muttered. They didn't live it. But deep down, I couldn't shake the ache. It wasn't just about reputation, it was about narrative. The idea that someone else could tell my story louder than I could. That people who had never known my sacrifices were forming opinions based on a manipulated snapshot. The next morning, I got a message request on a new social media account I hadn't used in years. It was from Jamal, Kira's husband. We had barely spoken even during the marriage. He was always polite but distant, as if being in the same room with a man who laid bricks for a living was somehow uncomfortable for him. His message read, "I know things have gotten out of hand. Kira's emotional right now, but this doesn't have to be permanent. Families fight, then they fix it. Maybe we can talk, man to man." I stared at the message for a long time. There was no apology, no recognition of how they'd treated me, just an attempt to reset the table without clearing the mess. I didn't respond. I didn't need another performance. I needed space and respect. Two things that had been missing since the day I lost my job and became disposable in their eyes. But Jamal's message sparked something else in me, resolve. I started working on a legal will that week. I wasn't sick, and I wasn't planning on dying anytime soon, but I didn't want there to be any confusion down the road. I sat with a lawyer in the next town over and made it clear Kira was to receive nothing. Not out of spite, not out of vengeance, but because I wanted every dollar I had to go towards something that mattered, housing for veterans, scholarships for trade school kids, food banks that fed people like the man I used to be. My legacy would not be defined by guilt or manipulation. It would be shaped by choice. One night, as Tony and I sat out back watching the stars blink into life, I told him about the will. "You sure about that?" he asked. I nodded. "She had her chance," I said. "All she had to do was be there. But she couldn't do that without strings attached." He was quiet for a while, then said, "It's hard to walk away from your own blood." I took a sip of my coffee, the warmth bitter and grounding. It's harder to stay when your own blood poisons you. That was the truth of it. Family doesn't give you license to destroy someone and still expect an invitation to dinner. Family should be the ones who see you at your worst and love you anyway. Kira saw me at my worst and used it as leverage. That's not love. That's control. Later that week, I ran into an old neighbor from the city. He'd moved to the area a few years back and recognized me at the hardware store. We made small talk at first until he asked, "Your daughter really out here saying you disowned her over some money?" I smiled politely. She disowned herself the day she made my dignity a condition of her generosity. He looked at me for a moment, then said, "People forget how much a man gives up for his kids. They only see what they think he's holding back." That stuck with me for days. Because it was true. No one knew about the second job I took cleaning office buildings at night just to afford her college prep classes. No one knew how many times I skipped meals so she could have name-brand clothes and never feel out of place. No one knew the 1,000 small sacrifices I made that never came with a thank you. And now, because I chose to protect what little I had left, I was the villain. But villains sleep better than victims, sometimes. The week ended with another letter, this one handwritten. No return address. Just my name in neat cursive. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Kira's. I almost threw it away. Almost. But something told me to open it. Inside, it was more of the same. Half regret, half guilt trip. Lines like, "I just wanted to feel important to you again." And, "You chose money over me, and I'll never understand that." I sat on the porch for a long time after reading it, the wind playing with the edge of the paper. Then I tore it in half, tossed it in the fire pit, and watched it burn. I didn't need her to understand. I didn't need anyone to. I had stopped living for validation. Now, I was living for peace. And peace, it turns out, comes with a price of its own, the courage to be misunderstood. Some endings don't come with a bang. They don't arrive screaming, slamming doors, or flinging accusations. Some endings are quiet, a slow tapering off, like a song fading into static. That's how it felt after I burned the last letter Kira sent. There was no relief, no celebration, no dramatic closure. Just a soft emptiness, the kind that doesn't hurt, but lingers. I sat in that silence for days, not waiting for her to call again, but adjusting to the finality that she wouldn't. For the first time in months, I wasn't checking my phone. I wasn't waiting to be dragged back into the undertow of guilt and obligation. I had drawn my boundary, clear and deep like a trench, and I was finally standing on solid ground. And it wasn't bitterness that kept me there. It was self-preservation. I think people get boundaries confused with punishment. When I told people I cut my daughter off completely, some reacted like I had locked her out of my heart in some fit of rage. But what they didn't understand was this. Boundaries are a last resort, a shield you raise when every attempt at understanding has been met with selfishness and cruelty. Kira didn't get cut off because she asked for help. She got cut off because she only remembered I existed when there was something to gain. And when she didn't get it, she didn't ask me why. She didn't wonder if I was okay or offer a moment of reflection. She attacked. She lied. She made me the enemy in a story I never asked to be part of. And when you realize someone values your pain less than their narrative, that's when you have to walk away. I took a walk through town one morning, just after sunrise. The sky was still soft with early light, the streets mostly empty except for the occasional jogger or dog walker. I passed the diner, the hardware store, the park bench where I once sat wondering if I'd ever feel like myself again. It was strange, how something so small and quiet could feel more like home than the city I'd spent most of my life in. Maybe because here, I wasn't anyone's embarrassment or charity case. I was just me, a man who had lost, survived, and chosen not to let bitterness rot what was left of his soul. I stopped at the coffee shop and ordered my usual, black with 1 sugar. The young barista smiled and said, "You're the lottery guy, right?" I chuckled, nodded. "That's me." She handed me the cup and added, "Good for you. You seem peaceful." I smiled at that. It wasn't something people used to say about me. But she was right. I was. Later that week, I finished the final touches on the house. It wasn't grand or flashy. Just a modest, one-story home with wide windows and a screened-in porch where I could sit and read without bugs biting at my ankles. The kitchen had deep blue cabinets and a small dining nook that caught the morning light just right. I had a garden out back, nothing fancy, just tomatoes, peppers, a few herbs. But it gave me something to tend to, something to nurture. Tony came by with a bottle of cheap wine and a loaf of fresh bread. "To new beginnings," he said, clinking his glass against mine. We ate in silence for a while, the kind of comfortable quiet only two men who've been through hell and back can share. "You did good, man," he finally said. "You didn't let them break you." I looked out at the yard, the sky turning shades of lavender and gold. "I almost did," I admitted. "But I figured if I didn't stand for myself now, I'd be laying down forever." One night, as I was closing up the house, I saw a car parked at the end of my driveway. My heart jumped. Part of me expected it to be her. Kira, come to make one final plea or throw one last accusation. But when I walked outside, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. Late 30s, tired eyes, holding a small boy by the hand. "Are you Mr. Carlton?" she asked. I nodded, cautious. "I hope this isn't weird, but I think you helped my sister." "The food bank?" She said someone donated enough money to keep them open for another 6 months. I felt the tension in my shoulders soften. I nodded again. "That was me." She smiled, eyes misting. "Thank you. You saved her. You saved her kid." The boy waved shyly. I bent down, smiled at him, and said, "Take care of your mama, all right?" He nodded seriously. As they left, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Useful. Not used, but genuinely useful. That moment reminded me why I made the choices I did. Why I walked away from Kira, why I didn't give her the money, why I refused to let guilt and public pressure rewrite my truth. Because love without respect isn't love, it's dependency. And family without trust isn't a bond, it's a trap. I wasn't going to be manipulated into financing a lifestyle that had no room for me until it became convenient. I wanted my money to mean something. I wanted my second chance to count for more than just numbers on a screen. And if that meant being called cruel by the people who only showed up when they smelled opportunity, so be it. Months passed. The calls stopped. The posts faded. Eventually, even the whispers in town died down. People moved on, as they always do. I kept living, reading, planting, fixing. Tony and I started a monthly gathering at the house. A few good folks, simple food, laughter under string lights. Sometimes AITA came by and brought her study books, asking questions about the law, about life, about how to tell the difference between obligation and guilt. "It's simple," I told her one night. "Obligation makes you show up. Guilt makes you disappear after you do." She nodded, scribbling it down. I smiled. If nothing else, at least I had my words. One evening, I stood on my porch watching the sun dip below the hills, thinking about Kira. Not with anger, not even with sadness, just a kind of quiet clarity. She was part of me. She always would be. But I couldn't carry the weight of her expectations anymore. I had carried too much for too long. Letting her go wasn't an act of punishment. It was an act of survival. I had found peace, not in being right, but in being honest with myself. And sometimes, that's the only closure you get. If you've ever had to choose peace over people who claimed to love you but only showed up when it suited them, then you know the kind of pain that doesn't come with easy answers. Would you have forgiven your daughter, or would you have done the same? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever had to draw a line between love and survival, this channel's for you. Subscribe for more stories that cut deep and speak the truth. See you soon in the next story.